International Zoroastrian scholar from Mumbai, Dr. Noshir Dadrawala will now speak.
Imam Sahab, Swamiji, Jayesh Bhai. One of the most difficult tasks of a speaker is to speak post-lunch. And I know that if one crosses the limit of the time given, then the heads can nod. I'm going to try and ensure that doesn't happen, and I will stay within my time limits. Before lunch, somebody started by speaking in Hindi. ભાઈ ગુજરાતમાં છીએ કેમ છો? હું તો પારસી છું એટલે ગુજરાતીની અંદર બહુ આનંદ આવે બોલવા, પણ I am aware that there are people here from all countries, all states of this country. So I shall keep it a little mix of English, Hindi, and maybe થોડું ઘણું ગુજરાતી બી લઈ લઈશ અંદર. પારસી એટલે ભારત દેશની અંદર સંખ્યામાં જોવા જાઓ તો માઇનોરિટી નથી પણ માઇક્રો માઇનોરિટી છે. પ્રધાનમંત્રીએ બી એક યોજના બનાવી જીઓ પારસી, વાંચ્યો છે પેપરની અંદર. એક સ્કીમ બનાવી છે ગવર્મેન્ટે કે એ લોકોને નેશનલ પોલિસી છે હમ દો હમારે દો. But the government is now so concerned about the diminishing numbers of this community that it has actually launched a scheme for its growth. Growth only in numbers, because otherwise in terms of prosperity that is not a question. We have been fairly prosperous. Perhaps we are the only community who has never insisted on minority status or any minority rights. We are a It goes back to the time jare Parsi is એટલે, where does the word come from? Farsi, Persia. There was a time when the empire of Darius the Great, and that is 5 centuries before the birth of Christ, the empire of Darius the Great was from the river Indus to the river Danube. That was the peak of the Achaemenid Empire. An empire that was started by Cyrus the Great, Kurusha Buzurg. History says that Cyrus is the man who gives this world the first Charter of Human Rights, the first Bill of Human Rights. He is probably the only non-Jew who has been regarded as the anointed of the Lord and the shepherd of the Lord, because he frees the Jews from Babylonian captivity, and something unprecedented in world history happens, where he not only frees the Jews from slavery, but he grants them various freedom, including the freedom to pursue their own religion. Not only that, he returns all the temple wealth that was given, looted by Nebuchadnezzar, the wicked king of Babylon, but gives more money from Persian coffers to rebuild the Temple of Solomon. And he brings out for this world the first Bill of Human Rights, where he grants various freedoms. One of the key freedoms that he gave mankind was the freedom and the right of worship. He says, in my kingdom, I tolerate all faiths. You have a right to worship a God of your own choice. In my kingdom, I shall tolerate even the atheist, that is a non-believer. That Bill of Human Rights is on what is called a Cyrus cylinder. It's a very small cylinder, and in ancient cuneiform script, this Bill of Human Rights is there. The original Cyrus cylinder is at the museum in London, but its replica even today is at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The first to give the Charter of Human Rights. And 5 centuries before the birth of Christ, where does his precept of this kind of generosity in thought, word, and deed come from? It comes from a rather unknown prophet called Zarathustra, who the Greeks call Zoroaster, but his name is Zarathustra. Roughly translated, his name means the shining golden star. That's what his name signifies. No one knows where exactly he was born or when he was born. Greek historians have put him as late as 6000 BC, which is literally pushing him to the Stone Age. Modern scholarship says probably he was born 1600 BC. That's about 3600 years from now. That's what modern scholars put him as. It's not certain where exactly he was born. In modern day Iran, Afghanistan, was it Central Asia, the Russian steppes, but it was somewhere in that region. But it is not important where he was born and when he was born. What is important is what was his message. And his message was fairly simple. It is said that when Zarathustra received his first revelation from God, it is kind of put in a parable that there was a question answer between him and his God, which he referred to as Avra Mazda, which means the Lord of Wisdom. And Zarathustra is believed to ask one question: who is the best man among all the people of this world? That's his question. And I think in the answer that he received from God is the essence of his religion and his message for all humanity. Remember the question: who is the best man among all the people of this world? And the answer he receives is, he who walks on the path of Asha, which means truth and righteousness. He who gives charity. He who is just. He who reveres the fires. He who reveres the waters. He who reveres the earth. And who is kind even to animals. One question, the very first question to God, and his first answer. The concept of ecology, the concept of living in harmony is summarized, and there are hundreds of such questions. But I think this very first fundamental question puts God in perspective. His teachings are in a work called the Gathas. It is said even Rabindranath Tagore was so fascinated by the Gathas that he wrote various treatises on it. But what is the concept of God that we find in the Gathas? In the Christian tradition, we see God as the Father. In other traditions, we see him as the Lord. Zarathustra calls his God his friai, which is my beloved friend. This concept of friendship with God is something that I find unique in Zoroastrianism, where you treat God as not someone to be feared. Because there is a saying in the English lexicon, he or she is God-fearing, or you should be God-fearing. Zarathustra says, if you walk on the path of righteousness, why should you fear your friend? Do you fear your own friends on earth? Then why fear God? If you've walked on his path, you are his friend. And that concept of friendship with God and friendship with everyone else, this concept of friendship is central to his teachings. He teaches in the Gathas the concept of happiness, which he refers to in the old Avestan language as Ushta. Ushta means happiness. And he says, Ushta amai yamai ushta kamai chit. Happiness comes to him who makes others happy first. That is the concept. How do you find happiness in this world? Today the world has become a different place. I'm actually reading in books and on the internet, you must be happy first. Then everybody else will be happy. Something that I grew up on was this precept, that happiness comes to him who makes others happy. Because that's the highest form of happiness that you can possibly get. Zarathustra saw in this world that this world is a place where there is a constant struggle between the forces of good and evil. But he says, evil does not exist. You might be concerned. ये क्या कह रहा है कि evil का कोई प्रमाण ही नहीं है इस देश में, इस धरती पे? Evil really does not exist? And the analogy is brought out by the fact that does darkness have an existence of its own? And the answer is no. If this room is pitch dark and you light a candle here, where has darkness gone? But if this room is lighted, can you bring darkness to it unless you take light away? In like manner, Zarathustra said that only goodness and truth exist. Evil and the lie is moving away from what is truth and what is good. That is the concept. And he has identified for us, where does evil exist? It exists in anything that is impure, anything that is polluted, anything that is unclean. And that can start with your impure thoughts, your impure words, and your impure deeds. Therefore, cleanliness in thought, word, and in deed is paramount. He says, secondly, it exists at an ethical level. Thank you. That there are various social evils in this world. Poverty, hunger, attack it. And one way this community of mine has done is through its charities, whether it is schools, to remove the shadow of illiteracy and various other things. I've already been given a slip to kind of cut it short, so I've been given 2 minutes. I will stick to the promise I had made. Parsis are known for their promises. So one of the promises we had made, and I'll end with that story. It is said that when the Parsis came to India in the wake of the Arab persecution in Iran, they landed on the shores first in Zoroastrian and then came to Gujarat. And there was this king called Jadi Rana. And he was not too happy with these people coming into his land. Who are these people? They look very alien to me. And they speak a different language. So it says, the story goes, we don't know whether it is true or false, but it's a beautiful story. It is said that he sent a bowl of milk up to the brim, bhara hua, trying to say, this is my land, it is filled with this milk. Where will you fit in? And it said the leader of the Parsis took a pinch of sugar and he put it in the milk and he said, this is what we will be to India. We will add sweetness to your milk. Thank you very much.